is, it is such a template of success.
As you say in football, man-to-man marking, and Hyundai is not giving up on some of the critical segments of the market.
Even looking at the enthusiast segment with the N-line range.
One of the very few companies to operate their factories at almost 95% utilization.
They understand India, they know how to make products from India, and they've got massive global technology which can be, and that should be actually a worry for the Indian brands. The Indian auto industry is exciting, fast-changing and evolving. And that's what we look at closely in our weekly podcast, Deep Drive, powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
Hi, I'm Ketan Thakkar. Happy to be back.
Good to have you back, Ketan. Whenever we have Ketan with us, it's because we have a lot of masala as to what's happening in the Indian industry. And today's topic is about a brand or a company that's been in the news, Hyundai, or we should say Hyundai. That's, we are told, is now the correct pronunciation.
Yes.
Hyundai, which maybe rhymes with Sunday. That's one way of getting it right. But so Hyundai, I think, they've announced some pretty big plans. They're going to be in the news, going for an IPO. But more important, they've put a target of 1 million cars by 2027. So, Ketan, let's dive straight into what our viewers want to know. To get there, you need products. Let's spill the beans on the product roadmap going forward.
Oh, yes, Hormazd. Product is a critical cog in the wheel, because of which they had remained at around 750,000 units for a while. Clearly, electrification is an avenue which all the automotive companies are diversifying into. You mentioned about IPO, the draft red hearing prospectus does mention about 4 electric vehicles coming in their portfolio. But beyond the electric vehicles, let me try and tell you that the ICE game, that's...
it's still the strongest game, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, like as you say in football, man-to-man marking, and Hyundai is not giving up on some of the critical segments of the market. What we understand from our friends in the industry, they are carefully looking at bridging the gap in its portfolio. What we learn now is that there could be a potential Fronx rival coming in from Hyundai. There is a sort of an electric version of Exter. You may call it Inster. Some global previews have happened. There's a mass market.
What is the rough time frame for these?
So, first and foremost, we're going to see the mass market electric vehicle coming in 2026. Rather, Creta EV. That's something that is public.
Year.
Yeah, that's public. That's coming in the first quarter of calendar year 2025. That will be followed by a mainstream SUV EV in 2026.
And Kia is doing a similar one, I think, which is...
they're going to have a compact vehicle. They'll have their own differentiator between both the brands. But clearly, the eyes are on the mainstream market. We've already heard about their partnership with Excite. They want to ensure that they are deeply localized, and they are offering vehicles which resonates with the Indian buyers, and which has been their biggest strength over the years. So we have Creta EV coming up. We have a mainstream EV, which may be called as Inster EV for the Indian market. And then they are not keeping their eyes off the ICE market. And there's going to be a Fronx rival. There's going to be XUV700.
So Fronx will be ICE and EV.
At this point in time, it is likely to be ICE. As far as their thought process is concerned, they've been exploring potential of getting an EV version of Grand i10. They've been exploring potential of getting an EV version of Venue. Those projects are they're being explored. They are yet to get onto the development drawing board, so to say. But Two major projects, Creta EV and mass market EV, is something that one can expect from Hyundai. And when they come in with their products, that they're very strong, competitive, futuristic, good in design, and also going to give a run for the money for the existing...
But is the mass market EV going to be just an EV, or could it be ICE? Because I think what Kia is doing is they are having it ICE. So critically, it will be below sub 4 meters, because ICE gets that benefit.
Right.
From what I understand, Hyundai is just looking at EV for now.
Yes. So, in the past, the talk
could be a bigger car as well.
Yes. So, what I understand,
4 meters. Yeah.
It's likely to be under 4 meter. If you look at what we understand, it is going to be based on Casper EV, which is globally unveiled as well.
Right.
So, it is going to be a little longer than Casper, but likely to be in that mainstream market. I believe it would rival Punch EV rather than the Nexon EV.
So that's really going down into the...
That's the preliminary understanding we have at this point in time. So they are actually looking at which are the major, growth areas in the electrification space wherein the brand can actually hit the ground running. So Creta is the name everyone aspires to own and wants to get into that space.
I mean, to me, Creta is it is such a template of success. I mean, though the Duster created the mid-size SUV segment, Creta has just gone and owned it and dominated it. In fact, we always call it the Creta segment. Any cars that come in that segment, we call them Creta rivals. So I think clearly we'll talk about the Creta a bit, about 14,000 a month. That's really their bread and butter. And in that segment, there's a lot of profit as well.
Right.
So really the cash cow right now for Hyundai.
No, absolutely. And in fact, if I were to give you a little bit of a picture on how their sales look like, Creta is top of the ladder when it comes to volumes. And as interestingly, as the price points go lower, the volume goes down.
Also, the revenue is about 9,000.
About they're averaging about 9,000. Extra is about 7,500, 8,000. Grand i10 and Aura goes below. So clearly, Hyundai has understood the premiumization game. They really soup up their products with all the latest gadgets and gizmos.
But they have lost market share. I mean, if you look at it going forward, that's one thing which we've noticed, especially coming out of COVID. It's where the Indian brands have gained market share. But I think the strategy is not so much about market share. It's about profitability, which is, I think, the game for everyone today, because you need those profits and cash to kind of, go into the transition of EV. It's eye-wateringly expensive. You need that capital. You need that cash to kind of secure your future.
Hormazd, I think they took a pivotal call somewhere in 2018, 2019. Sandro was fading a bit. The traction in the market was not there. The new regulations for emissions were coming. Safety regulations were being talked about.
It makes these cars unviable, very expensive.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a game Maruti plays the best. You can't beat them at it. And maybe that's why, Maruti has that market share, because it is in these very challenging,
absolutely,
high volume, low margin segments.
Absolutely.
Which maybe I think Hyundai decided to. I mean, Eon was also there. Let's not forget that.
Correct.
I mean, never imagine Hyundai making a car like an Eon. It didn't, nowhere in the world. I mean, just over here. But clearly, I think the thinking has shifted for a lot of OEMs, not just Hyundai, because everyone is slowly getting out of that segment. And clearly, we had Datsun, which tried that, failed miserably.
Yes.
I think, frankly, there's out of the
only Renaults,
only the Quid.
Only the Quid, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. So, but just coming back, Ketan, looking at products. Creta, obviously, there'll be a new Creta coming. There'll be a new Alcazar coming. What's the plan for these vehicles?
So the facelifted Alcazar, the new Creta we saw recently. So it's going to continue for a brief while. The new Alcazar is around the corner. The facelifted Alcazar, it should come this year, sometime in the second half.
Yeah. But there is a development started for the next gen Creta also, which will have a level of
3 years down the line. Yeah. I mean, one thing that
facelift and then
correct. One thing that Hyundai has done very well over the years is to ensure that their products are upgraded with the features that the Indian consumer wants. I think apart from Maruti Suzuki, there's one company that has understood the psyche of Indian buyers. That's Hyundai. And when I was talking about the pivotal shift in 2018, I think the shift to choose powertrains, I think they retained the diesel and the massive shift towards the SUVs also began. We have started seeing Venue actually beefing up in numbers. The Extra was around the corner. And in the future as well, I mean, the SUV portfolio is going to be spruced up.
So you've got Venue, you've got Creta. I mean, Venue and all are going. You've got Alcazar. What are the other SUVs in the pipeline?
So clearly, I mean, they've watched the market closely. XUV700 has really created that strong following.
So the XUV700 rival is on the cards.
Absolutely. Somewhere around 27 is when
2027.
2022.
Could it theoretically be a 7-seater Tucson, which is highly localized and compete?
So what we understand right now, it's likely to be a long wheelbase Tucson,
which they have in China.
Yeah, which they have in China. So that's a potential alternative that is being explored for the Indian market. The preliminary discussions have started, and when Hyundai discusses 99% of the time the projects are executed. So one can expect a model coming in there. And another interesting segment is the compact crossover segment. Nexon did really well there. And we have the Fronx from Maruti Suzuki. And we've seen Hyundai actually mapping Maruti's plan over the years, and they cannot let go of that segment. So there is a product called Bayon globally. That is also one of the alternatives that is being seriously looked at in the Hyundai world. So clearly they're going to be bridging the gap in their portfolio. And like you mentioned about market share, one of the reasons why the market share was slipping was Indians were getting into segments where Hyundai was not present, like XUV700 was one segment, like Punch was another segment, which Hyundai eventually got into. So they are picking the spaces and they're going to bridge the gap. And yet to be confirmed, but there is an exploration of probably a 7-seater venue. Can they cater to an MPV market there? I mean, MPV was always on the radar of Hyundai for a while.
And typically within the group, it's Kia, which was said, okay, you guys do MPV and, we'll focus on SUV a bit. I think there has to be some understanding, though they fight like cats and dogs in the market over here.
Correct.
I think at the top, there is some understanding, but there's no stopping one from encroaching into the other stuff, I guess, because, the Karens is supposed to be an MPV, which Hyundai never got into. I think it's because Kia with the Carnival is a more kind of MPV brand in that sense.
Right. And we've seen that segment, with the Ertiga, with the Karens, with the Triber. Clearly, there is a customer base out there who resonates well with that space.
It's a big segment, but tough to crack because
absolutely
brand loyalty is tremendous in that segment. I mean, a person who wants to buy an Innova will buy an Innova. Someone who wants to buy an Ertiga will buy an Ertiga. You can come with something with all the bells and whistles to entice them, but that's not what they want.
Right.
So I think it'll be a tough one to crack.
So right now the new gen venue is under works. There is a discussion of a 5-seater and a 7-seater. Again, it's a deliberation of sorts. Like you said, it's a very sticky market to get into. It's likely to be made out of the newly acquired facility of General Motors in Talegaon, and which actually addresses the first question that you asked, a road to million. Now the capacity is in place, products are being put in place, and the much talked about IPO. I mean, you're going to have Moolah coming in from sale of share through an IPO, and that is going to bring in huge amount of money to the company.
Right.
So,
and it'll Indianize the company to a greater extent, isn't it? I mean, in the end, Indians are going to own stock in the company.
Absolutely. So 17.5% is a sizable share.
Yeah.
You're going to have Indian directors. Over the years, Hyundai has made huge amount of money. I mean, if you were to look at the last 6 years, they've been averaging about 10 to 13% on EBITDA margin, which is phenomenal, which is amongst the best.
Right.
And in the last 6 years, the Indian market actually went through multiple cycles. Yet Hyundai has held on to its margins. One of the very few companies to operate their factories at almost 95% utilization.
Yeah.
So they balance local market and export market really well. And that has ensured that the Indian consumer gets some of the best products with best features and highly competitive products.
Right. And I think they've also been able to get away with a slight premium pricing. I mean, some vehicles like maybe the i20, become a little too expensive because that hatchback segment is sensitive to price. But I think in the SUVs, they've really nailed it. Again, come back to the Creta. For me, that's really a case study on how to crack probably the most successful product today by virtue of customer acceptance. Just the way the product is, it's a great product. It's not that they've stinted really anywhere, all the features. And it does so well for the company, and you've got the volumes.
And you got to give it to the company. I think the one thing that they've done very well over the years is managing life cycles.
Yeah.
Even with yearly updates, those updates are not gimmicks. Not limited editions.
Exactly.
But they are true to what the
other hand, if Volkswagen Skoda is just stop and start. I mean, we don't know when the life cycles for their 2.0 cars are just up in the air. But you're right. I think a lot of these companies who are committed here, they have absolute proper life cycle planning, and Hyundai has really been on top of the game in that.
And the major shift also happened towards the SUVs in favor of SUVs. 60% or 65% in fact this financial year. 65% of their sales come from SUVs. So they are good at plotting the trend. They are good at, getting the right feature sets at right price points. So, talk of sunroofs, talk of ADAS, talk of making 6 airbags mandatory. That was a call that Hyundai took after Mahindra and Tata actually took safety as a a good bandwagon to lead the customer in the customer
It
mindset.
was a competitive edge that way there. So and now in a way Hyundai is kind of being part of the same game.
Absolutely. So I think now that the capacities are in place, now that the products are going to be bridged and the much needed money is coming, and what I also understand, there's huge amount of emphasis on local development as well. So they already have a tech center and R&D center in Hyderabad. There is a talk of doubling capacity. They already there's a proving ground, if I'm not wrong. So clearly they do want to do a lot of work locally for the Indian market and participate in the market transition.
So, going to 1 million, not everyone is going to grow to the level. Who do you think they're going to take market share away from? Do you think they'll take it back from the Indian brands? Obviously, a little bit from Maruti, enable everywhere. But looking at their products right now, XUV700 competitor, opportunity there as well. But again, that's a strong brand. I think looking at the other products, EVs, of course, they could create a different market.
Sure.
So I think it's going to be a combination of both, expanding the market and taking market share.
No, absolutely. And we've seen it over the last few years, right? I mean, we've seen the top 5 players becoming bigger and bigger. And the tail is becoming thinner and thinner.
That's right.
And so definitely...
the big are getting bigger and the weak are getting weaker.
Absolutely. And so I think unless they get their act together right, the bottom players, the likes of Renault Nissan, the Stellantis, the Skoda Volkswagens, MG JSW, otherwise the big players with their, might of capacity utilization, amazing competitive edge in products, I think it's going to be a difficult game for the fringe players. But within the stronger players, clearly I think one feels that Tatas and Mahindras eventually in the next couple of years will hit a certain ceiling. And they've not seen much of competition beyond in the SUV space. Maruti was only playing in certain segments. Hyundai was only playing in certain segments. So I think the battle in the top 5 is going to get more intense. And I think it's going to be really... some share may go from Indian, some share may go from Toyota, Maruti.
And all this, younger or smaller brother, Kia, is, it seems to be, I wouldn't say losing out, but there's a lot of shared resource. I think some of the engines come from Kia. So I think that also is a synergy at the sourcing level, which can help as well.
Absolutely. I mean, they've been sweating the vehicle architectures big time. And one interesting element that we've seen in the Indian market is the grounds-up EV and the ICE-derived EVs. So because of a partner there, you are going to actually adapt both. You're going to have born EVs.
You have the scale with both.
Absolutely. You're going to have the scale. And we've heard about Kia looking at hybrids, and there's a lot of debate whether there is a market for hybrid. Clearly, we've seen that there is. What's the future?
And the outgoing MD, TJ Park, said that they are looking at hybrids. Maybe he wasn't supposed to say that. But clearly, if Kia is looking at it, I'm sure Hyundai will also be looking at it, though they are not.
No, in fact, the chairman was in India ahead of the IPO planning and in a town hall, or rather meetings within the discussion of hybrid had come in, while they have put in a word of caution in their draft red herring prospectus for the shareholders that if government were to support hybrids, it could be it could pose a challenge to the company's petrol and diesel vehicles. But they have technology. They are working on more accessible, more advanced hybrid technology that delivers better fuel efficiency.
But it's all expensive, very, very expensive.
Absolutely. So the only way that they can make it available to India at right price with Kia. And which is what you mentioned, the scale, the synergies between both the brands.
And a tax benefit, of course, is what will
that'll be a trigger point.
Whether that happens or not, we don't know. But I think also, what's I find amazing about Hyundai is, just the way they carpet bomb segments with multiple powertrains.
Absolutely.
Firstly, look at the automatics. They've got a manual, they've got an IMT, they've got a CVT, they've got a dual clutch, and they've got a torque converter.
Phenomenal.
That is 5 months in the group. It's 5 every type of conceivable transmission. So I think clearly it's a question of having the vision, having the gumption. Just go ahead and invest in the fact that India is, I think what is the 3rd largest market for Hyundai?
Yes.
In the world. So obviously that gives it a certain priority. because you can't ignore that.
Absolutely. And I think over a period of time, the share of India also has kind of been, I think last year in 2022 or 2023, India's share was almost about 19%. So there's a lot of skin in the game with the IPO. I think there's going to be further, reinforcement of the Indian market. And apart from the transmission, I actually wanted to ask you about the engine strategy as well. I think they were brave enough to hold on to the diesel.
Absolutely.
And that will help.
Yeah, of course it's helped because, whatever people say, and, we did a podcast on why Maruti exited diesel, it's still a big segment. And if you're a huge volume player, number one, number two, that's not a segment you want to let go of. I mean, if you look at it, all the top 4-5 players all have diesel except Maruti.
Right.
So clearly Maruti's reasons we know what the reasons were. So, because to have that volume, we want to be present in every possible segment. I think diesel is still a segment which has a substantial volume, especially for SUVs. It plays, to the strength of an SUV. People want that torque, they want that thing. And, in some segments, they are, 60% of the segment. So that's still a huge number. And though diesel is on the decline, looking forward, there's no serious emission regulation that can kind of abruptly end it. Even Euro 7 and the BS7, what it looks like, there's not too much deviation from BS6. Now it's more on the tires and brakes and stuff like that, where you got to reduce those emissions.
So you feel diesel will continue beyond?
I think, absolutely. I think diesel could continue up to 2030. Maybe very small, volumes, but I think it could because it's still got its advantages. And I think, we love diesel. Indians love diesel. It's just that we just don't know what other regulations might pop up. Suddenly AQI drops in Delhi, then diesel gets banned. That sort of knee-jerk stuff can keep happening, which kind of scares off buyers and even OEMs. You've got ministers saying ban diesel, stuff like that. So that's not very helpful. But at the end of the day, you've got to see what the consumer wants.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that. Does he want EVs as much or not? We don't know. Does he want? So it's all actually down to the consumer. And then, Ketan, I think one of the other things is CAFE is going to be who meets CAFE best.
Absolutely.
Is also going to be determining who succeeds beyond 27, 28 when the so-called tougher CAFE norms come into it. And there again, the top players, I think Hyundai also with all its EVs, well placed to comfortably meet CAFE.
And the other strength, what I feel, is definitely global technology, and they've also pivoted globally to look at hydrogen as an alternative. And Indian government has been extremely gung-ho about hydrogen, just like how we've seen Toyota, offering Mirai to Nitin Gadkari. I think even Hyundai has some of the hydrogen alternative globally. They have betted on hydrogen as an alternative fuel for the future. While Maruti is going the CNG and bio-CNG way, I think if the tide were to turn in hydrogen's way, I think Hyundai will be ready. And that's one doesn't talk about hydrogen at this point in time, but 5 years, 7 years down the line.
They definitely have the technology. And I think that's what makes them a very, very formidable competitor for others. They understand India. They know how to make products from India, and they've got massive global technology which can be. And that should be actually a worry for the Indian brands, because once they start getting their act together, I think localization is something they could work at a lot more. That's where I feel
right.
They need to do a little bit more on that. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so we got a little bit more details thanks to the draft red hearing prospectus because of the IPO. What we understand, reading a little bit of blueprint there, is that, almost 40% of part sourcing happens through its group companies, and almost 20% of that is, and some of that, about 20% is imported. So there's a huge room
for
localization. They have actually done a lot, and I think partnering Excite for batteries was a step in the right direction.
Excite is doing it with their sword, but anyway. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So clearly the technology tie-up is coming from elsewhere. The Excite is going to be localizing that. They're going to be setting up battery assembly within the factory. Already announcement has been made about creating capacity for that. And there are many other, Indian companies that they have reached out to in recent years, because that was one avenue where the government also had raised a question mark about why is it that Hyundai is not localizing despite being in the market for 25 years?
Yeah. I think also maybe in terms of where I think, another area where perhaps they're slightly below in the perception is that, the absolute running costs, hassle-free ownership, I think Maruti still is absolutely top dog in that.
Absolutely.
And that kind of comfort is something they would have to work on. Cars are inherently more expensive. I mean, the perception is that Marutis are cheaper to maintain, more widely. I think maybe that's one area they probably have to kind of also address. But, as you're moving up, it's not as much of an issue as it is at the bottom of the market, a segment they've vacated. So, in a way, they've got that formula quite right of what really works over here, making sure that, they make great profits as well. And lastly, Ketan, which I want to touch upon is, another segment that they really looked at is they're even looking at the enthusiast segment with the N-line range.
Right.
They've given the N-line to a lot of their models, which a lot of other brands haven't bothered to do. It's always a distraction getting into these niche kind of areas. It's tendencies just not worth the effort for the return.
Right.
But I think from a brand perspective, it's done well. And I think lastly, what we can end on is Genesis also coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's coming in 2025 is what we understand.
Yeah.
But amongst the various issues with regards to Hyundai, I actually want to touch upon i20 and the challenges that they face on the non-SUV portfolio. Verna had all the bells and whistles, radical design, but you look at the volumes of Verna now, it's about 1,300, 1,500.
The segment has collapsed, and frankly, the barometer in that segment is the city. And they're right up there with the city, isn't it?
But what I feel is the challenge that they face in the non-SUV space, I'd like to get your views there, because what has happened is that while SUVs have done well for the company, the non-SUV space, they've been there, but more as a challenger rather than stealing the market.
I think, with any company, it's a question of focus. Where you want to put your focus, you typically always put your focus where, you're getting the return. And sometimes to put a disproportionate amount of resource for the return, which isn't as great, it's just very natural to do that. I think they have to be present, but I still think, with Verna, numbers aren't as...
i20 was a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah. That is because I think that's also become expensive.
Right.
I think they have kind of make that pricing is quite...
Crossover there makes more sense.
Exactly. And then you're competing there straight with a compact SUV. So I think clearly in the hierarchy, consumers prefer a compact SUV, has more status, got more road presence, ground clearance, all that. Then a hatchback, which in my, for a buyer's is a little lower down the pecking order. So I think these are the issues. It's fact, the i10 Neos, it still soldiers on. Again, not great volume.
In fact, you did ask the management recently about the future of small car, and Tarun had a view. Tarun Garg, the head of sales and marketing there, the director of sales and marketing. So clearly they're not leaving segments per se.
No, they're not leaving segments per se. And I think it's important that they can't abandon all the segments because frankly, you need that base volume. Right. That is why Maruti is 40% of the market today is because they are present in these massive volume segments, which no one else is. Sure, they're shrinking, they're not growing, but they're still big numbers.
So I think bridging the gap in the portfolio is going to help.
Yeah.
And just one last thing, Hormazd, I wanted to touch upon is this race to million. Hyundai has had Tata Motors in its rearview mirror for a while now. Tata's got to bring in the Curve. There is the new Sierra coming. So clearly Tata is also building its portfolio. And the gap between both the players right now is not that much. And looking at the production plan of Tata's and looking at the growth projection that Hyundai has, I think it's going to be a close race this year as well. While Tata's have given their long-term forecast of a million by 2030, I think it is going to be an interesting race to a million.
No, absolutely. I think Tata has been nibbling away at Hyundai's heels. But I think, in my view, Tata's, let's say, moved up a gear and maybe gone into, overdrive right now. That's maybe Hyundai still in third, fourth gear. They've got, I think now looking
more ammo
right now. And the pace and intensity which they can do it. I think I wouldn't be surprised if that gap kind of starts increasing right now. Again, Tata Motors has got to also fix certain perception issues on, let's say, the quality and reliability of its products, which has, taken a bit of a hit. There's a lot of buzz around it. Hyundai much better in that sense, in terms of this all perception. And, clearly that's where they have the edge. So I think Hyundai is well placed, but again, it's a tough market. Competitors not sitting still.
Right.
I think you've got Mahindra also coming out.
Would you consider Mahindra? In fact, I was going to ask you, would you consider Mahindra as a dark horse there? Very quietly, already a revenue market leader in SUVs, and even they are creating capacities.
They are creating capacity. I think if you look at it, they're betting a lot on their EVs right now. How big the EV market is, that remains to be seen, because it's all turned on its head everywhere. It's not as big as I thought it would be. So, but clearly EVs is where they're going to be quite strong, and I think quite exciting. ICE products right now, they've got their winners, their icons, which keep chugging along and getting cash, and I think that will continue to grow. So I think Mahindra also on a good wicket, but I don't think they have the amount of the product avalanche, which, let's say,
and the segments as well. Mahindra's pure SUV player.
Yes, pure SUV player. So then clearly, that limits the number of segments they can compete in, and that of course limits their volume. I think Mahindra makes really juicy profits on there, and that really, I think everyone is very, very envious of.
Now, on the ICE front, I'm really excited to see the 5-door Thar, which is in the offing. The 3XO started on a good note. So I think it's a very closely fought battle for number 2. And it'll be interesting to see how... at the end of the day, Indian consumer is going to be the winner. You're going to get some phenomenal products.
Going to be the winner, and I think on that, it's a good point to say goodbye to all our viewers and listeners again. Great, Ketan. I think you've given some fantastic insights.
Pleasure.
Good digging around. I think also we have to say that, an IPO is coming up, so in no way is this any advice on what you should do
Absolutely
when it opens. It's not investment advice at all. It is just our view of what we think the company is going. We like to dive deep into every part of the industry and give you interesting information, news, and something that you can take home and learn more about the industry and the market. So once again, thanks so much for tuning in, listening to us. Don't forget to again tune in next Saturday 11 a.m. on our YouTube channel, and we're also on Spotify and Apple. And the best way to be reminded is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Autocar India, so you get notified every time Deep Drive drops.